Hi, today I am taking a chapter Footprints Without Feet, the chapter 5 of English literature. It's This book is written by author H.C. Wells, Herbert George Wells. He was born on 21st of September 1866 up to 13 August 1946. He was an English writer. He was prolific in many genres, writing dozens of novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, satire, biography, autobiography, even two books on recreational war games. He is now best remembered for his science fiction novels and is often called the father of science fiction, along with Jules Verne and Hugo Gernsback. So the objective of this story is to create interest in the students to study English stories, to develop the core skills of the language, to develop positive attitude towards the language, to enable them to discriminate the good from the evil, to develop moral values in the student. Some new words to be found in the story are bare feet without shoes, never walk bare feet in the jungle. This is an example of bare feet. Bewildered, surprised. So example, the children looked bewildered when they saw the footprints without any feet. Adventure, courageous act. Adventure requires mental toughness. Some new words are more. Clergyman, priest of the church. A clergyman reads Holy Bible before his followers. Chased, follow. The doctor chased a tiny cat. In a pub, typically one in the country, in some cases providing accommodation. Waging, move or cause to move rapidly to and fro. Solitude, the state or situation of being alone. Some key points of this story. Griffin, a scientist, discovers a rare drug which can make a person invisible. Second point, his landlord dislikes him. Griffin wants to take revenge on him. He swallows the drug and puts the house on fire. He puts off clothes, becomes invisible, and runs away. It was cold weather and he felt the needs of clothes. He sleeps inside a cloth store, had meal and slept at night. Two attendants chased him in the morning. He was again homeless and clothesless. He took a shopkeeper of a theatrical company and catches his train to Iping village to live in the village. The money of loot doesn't last long. He steals money from clergyman's desk to pay rent. Suspicion falls on the scientist when he pays rent. Mr. Hall finds the room of the scientist open. She wants to look into the room. A hat springs up and hits on her face. The chair of the room becomes alive and forces Mr. and Mrs. Hall out of the room. Suddenly, Griffin appears from nowhere. When Mr. and Mrs. Hall anger about a theft, Griffin gets angry. He removes the bandages and Paul knows. Now he was headless. The constable is called to arrest the headless man, which is wanted by the invisible scientist. So let's discuss about the summary of the story. This story is quite interesting because there's a scientist named Griffin. He had been finding ways that could make a man invisible. He got success in his experiment and developed a formula with which he can become invisible, that cannot be touched and felt physically. Griffith gulped the drug and became invisible. He accidentally stepped in mud and was first seen by two young men who followed his footprints till it becomes faint. He was walking on road and was feeling cold. So he enters a shopping center to feel warm. After the stores shut down, he chooses to wear some comfortable garments and eat something. He initially unpacks a couple of garments and wears them. At that point, from the kitchen of a cafe, he eats cold meat and some espresso. Later, he decided to sleep on a heap of quilts in his store. The next morning, before he wakes up, some store associates had seen started following him. He removes all the clothes instantly and becomes invisible once again. Now he is wandering about without clothes in chilly winter of London. He then decides to take clothes from a theatre company as he sure he will get something to cover his face too. He has stolen dull glasses, bogus nose, and a hat and some bandages for covering his face. Then he goes to a shopkeeper's place and stole all his money. Soon he realizes London is a quite busy place to live like this, so he thought of moving to the Iping village. He booked 2 rooms in a hotel in the village and reached there. It is quite unusual for the villagers that an outsider with such a peculiar appearance had come to stay in a hotel throughout the winter. After some time, the money exhausted. He started stealing from people. Furthermore, he hit the owner and his wife when they attempt to check his room in his absence. As they cannot see anyone, the owners thought that there were spirits in the inn and was unusual guest is responsible for it. At that point, the town constable is requested to inquire in regards to what his identity is and what he did to her furnishings. This made him annoyed and decide to show his identity as a headless man. They cannot catch hold of Griffin as he takes off all his garments and become invisible. So this is a summary of the story. So if we see the practical relevance or moral of the story is that the human nature of misusing their own discoveries. So better not to misuse whatever you have discovered. Use it in a proper manner to help the nation or the country. So here are some short questions and answers. Who was Griffin? Griffin was a scientist. Were the two boys surprised? They were surprised to see the fresh footprints, but they could not see any more. Why did he set the landlord's house on fire? His landlord disliked him and wanted to eject him. Where did he enter for warmth? He walked into the big London store for warmth. What did Griffith do in the shop of a theatrical company? He dressed up, put bandages, false nose, and looted some money. How did he go to the Iping village? He caught a train. Why did the landlord and his wife surprised to see the scientist's door wide open? Generally, he kept his door closed. How did Griffin escape from London School? When two attendants chased him, he threw away his clothes and ran away. So another question is, how did Mr. Griffin enter the shop of the theatrical company? What did he do there? He was invisible, so the shopkeeper did not like see him. He dressed up, put bandages and false nose. The landlord's wife was convinced that Griffin was an eccentric scientist. What made her think of Griffin in these terms? He was alone. He wanted no disturbance in his work. In that season, people did not come to stay there. What was a curious episode that took place in the clergyman's house? Money was stolen and the kinch of money was heard, but nobody was seen. So, some long questions and answers. First one is, how did the invisible man first become invisible? The invisible man swallowed certain rare drugs and his body becomes as transparent as a sheet of glass. The invisible man was a scientist. He carried out numerous experiments to prove that the human body could become invisible. Question 2. Why was he wandering in the streets? Griffin was a brilliant scientist but a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. Thus, he became a homeless wanderer. Why does Mr. Hall find the scientist eccentric? Mr. Hall tries her level best to befriend Griffin, but he had no desire to talk. He told her that he came to Iping for solitude. He did not wish to be disturbed in his work. What curious episode occurs in the study? A clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study very early in the morning. Creeping downstairs, they heard the tint of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. He and his wife looked under the decks and behind the curtains and even up the chimney. There wasn't a sign of anybody. Yet the decks had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. What other extraordinary things happened at the inn? The answer is the landlord and his wife surprised to see the scientist's door open. Usually it is shut and locked, and he becomes furious if anyone enters his room. The opportunity seems too good to be missed. They peeped round the door, see nobody, and decide to investigate. The black bedclothes were cold, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time. All of a sudden, Mr. Halls heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bed post leapt up, dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her, legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and appeared to slam and lock the door after them. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into the furniture. So the Griffin was rather a lawless person. It's a just comment about this question. So answer is it's rightly said that the Griffin was a lawless person. He was not a law-abiding citizen. A person who follows law and order of the country cannot think of damaging other properties. But Griffin set fire to the house and became a homeless wanderer. He also robbed a shopkeeper of all the money he could find. He stole the housekeeping money from the clergyman's desk. Griffin also attacked Mrs. Hall when she entered his room. All these activities and instances prove that he was a really lawless person. So, the last question is how would you assess Griffin as a scientist? Griffin had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. He did not want it to do it for the welfare of the society, but to satisfy his own ego and carry out synthetic deeds. He was a brilliant scientist, but not a law-abiding a scientist's work is to invent those gadgets and devices which can make the earthly in existence comfortable. But Griffin has swallowed certain rare drugs and becomes invisible to torment the innocent people. He was a criminal scientist and who had no respect for the humanity. Thank you.